Never could I have imagined that our paths would cross again, leading me to uncover a shocking truth. My name is Ashley, and I'm 35 years old. For the past decade, I dedicated myself to being a full-time wife, supporting my husband Sam with unwavering dedication. Though we never had children, we always believed our love was more than sufficient. A fulfilling life didn't hinge solely on parenthood. But then, Sam changed. Looking back, maybe it was his true nature finally surfacing. You see, my parents divorced when I was young, and I was raised by my father. During my teens, he confided in me the reason for their split: different personalities. At the time, it seemed trivial to end a marriage over such differences. But as I grew older, I painfully realized how crucial compatibility is. This reality hit harder when my father tragically died in a car accident last year. My father, a craftsman at heart, ran a successful construction business until his last days. Even at 70, he was revered for his skills, especially in building churches without nails, a technique admired by his clients and community alike. He would always cook for me after work with his dexterous hands, nurturing me with love and care. He often said, "What's important is not what you get in return from others, but how much joy you can give to them." I strive to live by his words, devoting myself to Sam. However, after my father's sudden death, Sam's demeanor changed drastically, revealing a side of him I had never seen before. Our conversations increasingly revolved around my father's inheritance. "With your dad's money, we can build our dream home," Sam would say, eyes gleaming with a newfound ambition. Yet I had never intended to use that money for anything other than our retirement savings. My father had worked tirelessly to leave us a secure future, not for us to squander it on immediate desires. I saw the way Sam looked at the inheritance with an almost desperate hunger, and found myself downplaying its value. "We can't afford to buy a house with that," I lied, hoping to preserve what my father had intended. Sam's reaction was unexpected. He seemed devastated, as if his world was crumbling. It was then I realized how much money could alter a person. I began to doubt if Sam had stayed with me solely for my father's inheritance. However, about 6 months later, on a weekend while I was doing chores and Sam was watching TV, he spoke up with an unusual seriousness. "Oh, I have something to tell you," he said, and for the first time since he proposed, his tone was grave. A chill ran down my spine as I sat across from him, watching a tear roll down his cheek. "What is it?" I asked, my voice catching. "I realize I've made you feel like I'm only interested in your dad's money," Sam began. "We don't have children, so we should be enjoying our time together, but I haven't put in the effort. Thank you for always being there, even though I leave all the housework to you and we rarely go out on my days off." His words stirred a mix of emotions in me, joy at his acknowledgement and regret for ever doubting him. Tears of both joy and remorse streamed down my face as Sam gently hugged me, his eyes reflecting the same warmth that drew me to him in the beginning. In that moment, I felt deeply grateful that I had married him. From then on, Sam changed his ways. Despite his fatigue after work, he started helping me with chores regularly. On his days off, he even experimented with cooking dishes he had never tried before. He took my occasional strictness in stride, and each time he overcame a new challenge, my heart swelled with pride. We began living each day as if we were newlyweds again. But then, 6 months later, things took an unexpected turn when a letter arrived in our mailbox. "Here, this letter was in the mailbox today. It's for you, Sam," I said, handing him the envelope. Carefully opening it with a pair of scissors, Sam exclaimed, "Wow, it's been 20 years since I graduated from high school. I've been invited several times, but I never went." Inside was an invitation to a reunion from his high school friends. I knew Sam had been invited to these reunions numerous times since we married, but he always declined out of consideration for me, knowing I had no ties to his classmates. This time, however, I encouraged him earnestly. "You should definitely go this time. Don't worry about me. Go and enjoy yourself with your old friends," I insisted. After some hesitation, Sam finally agreed to attend the reunion, which was scheduled for a month later. He began preparing for it, a rare occasion for him since he seldom socialized outside our relationship. His wardrobe lacked stylish clothes, and his hairstyle was usually unkempt. He explained that he felt no pressure to dress up around me because he could be completely himself. I've never been particularly fashion savvy, believing that inner qualities matter more than appearances. However, with the reunion approaching, our outings together turned into regular visits to men's clothing stores. I realized Sam's sudden interest in fashion was spurred by the upcoming event. Since the invitation arrived, Sam started coming home late from work. Normally punctual, he would arrive by 7 p.m., but it became common for him to return past 9 p.m., citing overtime. I trusted his explanation, though I hadn't seen our financial statements recently. Sam managed them and felt uneasy about questioning him. 3 days before the reunion, with only 2 weeks left, Sam came home and asked me to sit with him in the living room. "Michelle, my sister," he began. "She just broke up with her boyfriend and has been staying with a friend. But the friend's husband is returning next month, and she'll have nowhere to stay. I need to help my sister out." I understood Sam's concern for his sister very well. I have a younger brother who currently works overseas, and even after my marriage, I often worry about him and keep in touch. He's reliable, much like our father was, but sometimes too trusting and easily taken advantage of. Protecting him feels like my duty. So when Sam asked for help with his sister, I empathized deeply. But since our wedding, I hadn't met or spoken to her. I hesitated to use my father's inheritance for someone I barely knew, so I kept quiet about it. "Didn't your father love helping people? Why won't you help my sister?" Sam pleaded, confirming my suspicions that he wanted to use the inheritance. He desperately urged me to allocate a portion to Michelle. However, I remained steadfast in my decision. As I told you before, I have no plans to use my father's inheritance. I've decided to save it for when we might truly need it, I insisted firmly. Sam muttered something and retreated to his room, avoiding me since then. We shared meals together, but conversation dwindled to a minimum. No matter how cheerful my attempts at conversation, a cold atmosphere lingered between us. 2 days later, I was browsing cakes in a pastry shop, hoping to lift Sam's spirits. It was then that I felt a familiar gaze and turned around. "Dear, is it you, Ashley?" stood my ex-boyfriend from middle school. Despite 2 decades apart, we recognized each other immediately, which brought a burst of laughter from me. We had lost touch after high school, and I had no idea what he'd been doing. Meeting him here, back in our hometown, was unexpected. After buying our cakes, we decided to catch up at a nearby cafe. "Ashley, you haven't changed a bit," he remarked with a smile. "Neither have you. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years, I replied, feeling the exchange refreshing and out of the ordinary. We chatted and laughed for a while, reminiscing about old times. However, when the topic shifted to love stories, his expression suddenly darkened, leaving me unsure how to respond. "I recently broke up with my girlfriend, and all I do is regret it," he began. "Why did you break up?" I asked, curious to hear his side. "I couldn't provide her the emotional support she needed," he admitted. For a moment, I wondered if she was cheating, but what she said next resonated deeply with me. He went on to explain that his ex-girlfriend had a fragile constitution, unable to work long hours, and thus only held part-time jobs. Despite knowing this when they started dating, as he found success in the marketing industry, she struggled to keep pace. "I could provide a luxurious life," he told her, and reassured her that she shouldn't blame herself for not working as much. However, she never seemed to believe him, constantly in tears. Listening, I felt a pang of empathy for his ex-girlfriend. "You were just boasting about your achievements and putting pressure on her," I interjected. "She probably didn't want a lavish lifestyle. She likely felt lonely because you were too absorbed in your work." His busy schedule meant he only went home twice a week and didn't text her daily. Hearing this, I couldn't help but raise my voice. How did she tolerate that? If I were her, I would have ended things too. No matter how busy you are, neglect like that is unacceptable. You knew her limitations. Why did you care for her more? As the truth sunk in, I couldn't help but draw parallels to my own marriage, especially around our 3rd year together. I was struggling with infertility treatments and sank into a deep depression, both physically and mentally drained. Despite this, my husband, who claimed to be occupied with work, never once checked in to see if I was okay. After I finally expressed my pain, he apologized and made efforts to improve. The hurt from that time lingers painfully in my memory. Seeing how desperate I was, my ex-boyfriend seemed to realize his own mistakes. He confessed he wanted to reconcile with his ex, but lacked the courage to act. Wanting to help him, I listened to his grievances about my husband, and we spent time together consoling each other. At least that's what I believed. However, a shocking revelation left me stunned. My ex revealed that his older brother's wife was extremely cold-hearted despite being a stay-at-home wife. She neglected household chores and wasted money on nights out, pushing him towards considering divorce. Shocked by this story, I sympathized deeply. "That's awful. I can't believe he's putting up with her," I commiserated. "Yeah, that's why he's secretly planning to let loose at an upcoming reunion," my ex explained. The word reunion struck a chord. Comparing details about his brother's situation and my own husband's behavior, a shocking truth emerged. His recent ex-girlfriend was none other than my husband's sister, Michelle. We were both left speechless by this bizarre coincidence. Sharing everything about our troubled marriages, my ex became visibly upset on my behalf. "Your husband is lying. He's using his sister to gain access to your father's wealth," he concluded angrily. We decided to confront my husband the following day. Knowing his usual work hours, we tracked his movements. He left his office 10 minutes later than usual and headed towards an unfamiliar mountain lodge. There, we witnessed him being warmly greeted by a woman, clear evidence of his infidelity. Realizing how hard it would be to gather solid proof ourselves, we opted to hire a private investigator. Upon our return to the lodge, we discovered another unforgivable truth. My husband had purchased the lodge for $70,000 in cash, hiding this financial move from me. To add insult to injury, a woman with children was living there, seemingly to repay his debt. It became clear he was planning to exploit my ex-girlfriend, who is his own sister, in some sinister scheme. "I'm glad you didn't give him the money, Ashley. If you had, it would undoubtedly have been spent on his mistress," my ex-boyfriend remarked solemnly. "You're right. I never imagined he would hide such a large sum from me. It feels like he's mocking me," I replied bitterly. "Maybe we should confront him together," I suggested. My ex-boyfriend agreed, and together we reached out to his ex-girlfriend. Tearfully, she asked why he had contacted her, but when we revealed what we had discovered, she immediately wanted to meet me. The next day, the three of us shared our first meal together at a family restaurant, our eyes bright with relief at our long-awaited reunion. "I'm sorry I haven't seen you since the wedding. My brother told me not to meet you because you hate me," Michelle said, her voice filled with remorse. "Wait a minute. I never said I hated you. I even suggested to Sam that we should go on a trip together with you," I responded, the realization dawning that Sam had been the one to create a rift between Michelle and me. From the beginning of our marriage, Sam had been deceiving me, and I blamed myself for trusting him. Tears of regret flowed uncontrollably. Seeing me in such distress must have stirred deep emotions in both of them. In the quiet moments that followed, the three of us shared tears together. Speaking on behalf of my ex-boyfriend, I conveyed his feelings to his ex-girlfriend. She admitted her own flaws, saying, "I had a strange kind of pride. I ended up envying my boyfriend's success at work, and as a result, I couldn't be honest and rely on him." It was a sobering realization that a small misunderstanding or assumption between a man and a woman could lead to significant tragedy. From that moment on, they vowed to communicate with greater understanding and consideration for each other. Eventually, they reconciled and got back together. "I'm relieved," I finally admitted, feeling a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had been pondering what to do if things didn't work out, but I'm relieved that everything turned out fine in the end. "Despite the trouble my brother has caused, thank you for helping me. Now it's our turn to support you," my ex-boyfriend said sincerely. 3 days later, the moment arrived to take action. While my husband cheerfully headed off to his reunion, I began packing my belongings. The reunion was set at an inn about 2 hours away by car, with an overnight stay planned until the next evening. Thanks to the assistance of my ex-boyfriend and his girlfriend, I had extra time to carefully sort through and discard the photos that once held cherished memories with my husband. It struck me how love can change. It felt oddly refreshing to let go despite the sentimental value attached to those pictures. In our previous discussions, we decided to sell our house first. It was heartbreaking to part with this place that held so many memories of my father, but I knew he would understand. The following morning, I arranged for a moving company to transport our belongings to my husband's parents' house, accompanied by my ex-boyfriend and his girlfriend. We went to confront my husband and his parents with the truth. Upon hearing our recount, my husband's parents were furious. "We didn't raise a son who deceives his sister and wife like this," they exclaimed, pledging to sever ties with him while embracing me as their true daughter. That day, we spent a pleasant time together at their house. The next day, I received a call from my husband, announcing the end of the reunion and his return. As expected, his voice turned confrontational the moment I put him on speakerphone. "You're not going to give me the house even though I'm trying to take care of my sister?" he demanded. "No, I'm not," I replied firmly. "Then get out of the house by the end of today," he retorted. In the past, I might have been reduced to tears by such words, but this time, I remained composed. I now had strong allies in my ex-boyfriend and my husband's family. Realizing his attempts to regain control were futile, my husband shifted tactics, trying to appease me with pleasantries. However, it was too late for reconciliation. Hours later, he called again, panicked and breathless. "Where did you go? There's only my stuff left. What's happening?" Suddenly, his sister's voice pierced through the phone, accusing him. "It's disgusting how you're trying to turn Ashley's house into a love nest with your mistress." Confusion gripped my husband, and the room fell silent for a moment. After a brief pause, he erupted in a voice tinged with disbelief. "Michelle, is that you? Why are you with Ashley? What's going on?" I have nothing to say to a brother who betrays his wife without hesitation. "Anyway, I'm coming home now," Michelle replied icily, ending the call abruptly. An hour later, she returned with divorce papers signed by my husband, Sam. That marked the end. Our family home would be sold in 3 days, and I would receive alimony from Sam. It was a chaotic turn of events, but I believed it was for the best. Since then, I have been staying at my ex-husband's family home, focusing on studying for the caregiving certification I had always wanted to pursue. Meanwhile, my ex-husband sold his log house and now lives quietly in a small apartment with the woman he had an affair with. I feel refreshed and content, knowing that if she's satisfied with him, they can have each other. I am confident that a better person than my ex-husband will enter my life. Keep going, Ashley, I remind myself daily, embracing the fulfilling life I now lead.
I was shocked to discover that Kenny, who hadn't even attended my mother's funeral, had unexpectedly flown abroad with $200,000. "What on earth did you do with such a sum?" I asked him. "Do you remember that grand piano we had at home?" "I sold it, man," Kenny replied. "Coming from a wealthy family sure had its perks. That was a fine piano. I never imagined it would fetch $200,000. It seems Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano at home was his. My condolences. The inheritance rights to the family estate are all mine. However, that piano was originally bought by our grandfather for my brother, and it still belongs to him. My brother, who's always loved the piano and now works as a piano teacher, left it at our family home because it was too big for his house. Given my brother's strong sense of ownership, he would be furious to know that something of his had been sold without his consent. Knowing my brother, simply compensating him won't be enough. When I told Kenny this, he hung up immediately. My name is Rachel Schneider. I'm a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a distinguished lineage that dates back to colonial times and is well known in our community. Moreover, thanks to my late father's successful business, we now own assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was supposed to inherit the family estate. However, he had a girlfriend from a family that also required an heir. Desiring to marry her at all costs, he declared that he would give up all inheritance rights in exchange for not taking over the family responsibilities. This left me with the challenge of needing to find a spouse to continue the family name. Even though I had always wanted to be independent without relying on family wealth, I focused solely on my career. Before I realized it, I found myself in my mid-40s and still single. I needed to find someone, or a family line would end with me, so I took a leap of faith and attended a singles mixer. That's where I met my current husband. His name is Kenny, and he's surprisingly 10 years younger than me. Yet, at the party, he didn't pay attention to any of the younger women and came straight to me. "Are you sure you want to be with someone as old as me?" I asked him repeatedly, but Kenny looked straight into my eyes and answered, "I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been drawn to older, more grounded women." True to his words, Kenny gave off a gentle, reserved vibe. I felt that he could bring some peace to my assertive family dynamics. As our relationship progressed, there was something I had to tell him. My mother had been bedridden due to illness since last year, and I was taking turns with my sister-in-law, Catherine, to care for her. wondering how to break the news since we were considering marriage given our age. I finally mustered the courage to tell him on our third date, and to my surprise, he gladly accepted and even proposed, expressing his willingness to help with the caregiving. His kindness deeply touched me, at least that's how I felt in the beginning. Kenny, who works as a daycare teacher, seemed genuinely committed. However, a few months into our marriage, he suddenly expressed a desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he looked remorseful and said, "Sorry, Rachel. The parents at my daycare are just too demanding, and there's a lot of complaining. I just can't handle it anymore." Understanding the challenges he faced, I would normally have encouraged him to persevere. However, with him already helping with my mom's care, I found myself unable to say a word. Adding to the complexity, I was 3 months pregnant. Wanting to get along well with Kenny for the sake of our unborn child, I adopted a lenient attitude. Unfortunately, my leniency led to regret. As I came out of the shower and attempted to enter the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. The content of his call shocked me to the core. I managed to get married without her finding out I'm unemployed. She totally believed me when I told her I quit my job, when in reality, I quit like 2 years ago. It sounded like he was talking to one of his buddies, who responded, "Man, you're really something." Well, Rachel's family is pretty wealthy around here. I thought I hit the jackpot when I saw her at that dating event. But then again, given her age, I was probably the only one to approach her. The revelation left me feeling deceived. Was the gentle Kenny I knew all just an act? Despite the desire to confront him immediately, the thought of our unborn baby rendered me speechless. Discovering Kenny's true intentions shattered my confidence in our future. Today, Catherine, my brother's wife, will be taking care of my mom until 5:00 p.m., and then it's my turn. Pondering whether I should confide in someone about Kenny, that's when Catherine spoke to me, noticing my troubled expression. "Rachel, you look down. If something's troubling you, please share it with me. She's such a kind person, having taken care of her own mom for years, and she's really good with mine too." I confided in Catherine about Kenny, and she listened intently to my story. She reassured me, saying, "It's good you talked. Keeping this to yourself could have been harmful to your unborn child." I apologized for burdening her, but she responded with understanding, "No worries. Talking doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it surely lightens the load." Catherine seemed genuinely concerned, almost as if the situation were her own. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and without waiting for a response, Kenny entered. Both of us were taken aback, but Kenny acted as if nothing was amiss and smiled, saying, "Rachel, I'm going to help with your mom's care from today. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you straining yourself." Kenny was putting on the act of a gentleman in front of me, and I reluctantly agreed. When Catherine tried to offer assistance, Kenny spoke first, questioning, "I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house?" He used the same tone he used on the phone. Catherine explained the situation, but Kenny started saying horrible things to her. He accused her of trying to curry favor and insinuated that she'd be upset for not getting a piece of the inheritance if she married into money. Enraged by Kenny's harsh words, I wanted to leave the room, but Catherine signaled with her eyes not to. I reluctantly stayed quiet, watching the scene unfold. Kenny's attitude escalated, and he declared, "This family's wealth belongs to us, my wife and me, so I'll take care of my mother-in-law by myself from now on." Realizing it was pointless to say anything more, Catherine left the scene. I quietly slipped outside, feeling the weight of Catherine's hurt. I pondered how to extend my apologies to her. Meanwhile, Kenny took over the responsibility of caring for Mom entirely. Despite my offers to assist, Kenny insisted that I shouldn't intervene. He merely outlined the basics of caregiving. But his negligent approach resulted in tragic consequences. Our mother passed away. The funeral took place in a church where generations of our family found their final rest. However, Kenny disappeared from the day of Mom's passing. Despite my attempts to locate him amidst funeral preparations and arrangements, His absence perplexed relatives and neighbors alike. Catherine, tearful before the altar, apologized for entrusting Kenny with caregiving responsibilities. Approaching Catherine in her distress, I attempted to offer solace. "Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault," I insisted. She shook her head, anguish evident in her voice. "No, Rachel, it's not your fault. But where on earth is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he vanishes just as Mom passes away." Agreeing with Catherine's sentiments, I reflected on Kenny's frequent absences during his supposed caregiving duties. Neighbors mentioned his frequent departures from the house, casting doubt on his commitment to the task. They even noted the arrival of a large truck on one occasion. Though curious, I refrained from probing further amidst the funeral proceedings. Days passed, and Kenny remained absent. Then, unexpectedly, a call from Kenny disrupted my thoughts. "Hey, Rachel, I'm currently at a luxury hotel in Europe," he nonchalantly announced. Stunned, I demanded an explanation for his absence from Mom's funeral and his current whereabouts. Kenny's response was unexpected. "I spent $200,000. The mention of such a sum immediately triggered memories of the grand piano at our family home. "I sold it, man. It was a good one. Who would have thought it'd go for $200,000? It turned out that Kenny had sold the family's grand piano and was using the money to travel around Europe. The piano, which Mom said was a family heirloom, was indeed worth around $200,000. Apparently, the hotels Kenny booked were all quite luxurious, and he had quickly spent all the money. I never imagined Kenny would do something like this while supposed to be taking care of Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's a different story. The truck that had been at our home must have been there to transport the piano. Why on earth are you doing something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you since you weren't at the funeral." I confronted Kenny, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. "Well, you know when you have a kid, you won't have much free time anymore. You have a job, so I guess I got to be the stay-at-home dad," Kenny replied, surprising me with his nonchalant attitude. It's good that he wants to take on child rearing, but he seems intent on leeching off of me. Moreover, it appears Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano was mine. I explained to him that the piano originally belonged to my grandfather, who bought it for my brother, so the current owner is still my brother. "Oh, is that so? You scared me there. It'll be fine if I just apologize to your brother later, right?" Kenny seemed to lack any guilt about selling someone else's belongings. "Well, Kenny has only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he's unaware of my brother's intimidating nature. My brother works as a piano teacher, and ever since he was a child, he loved the piano. He pleaded with our grandfather to buy that specific piano, though currently there isn't space in his house for it, which is why it's at our parents' house. Yet he's still the owner. While working at a piano school, he has also expressed his wish to start his own school using that very piano. The piano means more to him than anything else. I can only imagine what kind of punishment he would impose on Kenny after hearing that it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother has a strong personality and hates dishonesty." I continued explaining. Kenny remained silent throughout. "When he finds out you sold his cherished grand piano, mere compensation won't cut it. My brother's not just strong-willed, but he doesn't settle for compromises either." I pondered the kind of punishment awaiting Kenny after our tense phone call abruptly ended. With a stern warning, I knew he was probably feeling regretful, racking his brains for explanations. Without delay, I called my brother and recounted everything about the call. Needless to say, he was livid. The next day, as Kenny rushed home and entered from the front door, his eyes widened at the sight of everyone gathered in the living room. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" he stammered in confusion. I had orchestrated the timing so that the whole family would be present when Kenny returned. My brother, along with his wife Catherine, fixed Kenny with a menacing glare. "Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel. What were you thinking Selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family? My brother's voice was cold, cutting through the tension. Visibly nervous, Kenny tried to justify himself, claiming he was just trying to help with chores out of boredom when he stumbled upon the old grand piano. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? My brother's stern expression demanded answers. As expected, my brother was playing the role of an interrogator, hoping to elicit a confession. Kenny hesitated, lost in thought, before stammering, the sale's money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. It was a feeble attempt at an excuse, and my brother's anger erupted. You're lying. Just how rotten are you? He thundered, his disappointment palpable. Pointing out Kenny's souvenir-laden suitcase from Europe, my brother accused, "What's with those souvenirs?" "I'm sorry, I used up all the money?" Kenny's admission silenced the room, the shock evident on everyone's faces. Spending $200,000 on an overseas trip seemed unfathomable. My brother, with controlled intensity, confronted Kenny. "I think you already know from Rachel, but that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. You okay with that?" His words hung heavy in the air, his demeanor reminiscent of a mob boss. Kenny, clueless about the law, looked to me for help, pleading in a pitiful voice. What did he expect me to do? I had nothing to do with this. It was all his doing. When I rejected Kenny's attempt to justify selling the piano, he began saying something ridiculous. "Don't be so cold. I took care of your mom while you were pregnant. I just thought of the trip as a reward for myself after taking care of her. Let's just say we both decided to sell a piano. Since we're siblings, it won't be theft, right?" I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't close my open mouth. Catherine came to my rescue, stating firmly, "Enough is enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance and tried to drive me away. What did you say such awful things to my wife too?" Kenny admitted to his insulting behavior towards Catherine, but my brother's anger flared again. "Listen up. The reason my wife took care of Mom was because she didn't want to go to a facility. My wife had experience caring for her own mother, so she kindly agreed to do it for mine. Money is a later issue. First, apologize to my wife right here, right now." Grabbed by the collar, Kenny, with tears in his eyes, knelt down in front of Catherine, saying, "I'm so sorry, Catherine." Despite Kenny's apology, all the relatives looked at him with cold eyes. One of them shouted, "You better pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible. We can't have a criminal in the family. It'll tarnish the Schneider's name." Kenny, misunderstanding once again, made another odd remark saying, "Right. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep things calm. We'll save money together as a couple and pay back little by little." At Kenny's nonsensical interpretation, even my uncle was left speechless. Realizing that no matter what was said, it wouldn't resolve anything, I decided to fetch something from my room. Since the incident on the phone when Kenny was talking with a friend, I had the business card of a divorce lawyer ready. "Kenny, call this number. I want our relationship to be over. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers," I said as I thrust the card at him. His face turned pale, and Kenny exclaimed, "Why? We're about to have a baby, and yet, why are you doing this?" At that moment, I revealed what Kenny had been talking about with his friend on the phone. "Wait, you've heard that? It was just a joke. You think that excuse will fly?" I responded, "I've known from the start that you approached me for my inheritance." Everyone present gave Kenny a cold stare, realizing there was no way out. Kenny retorted with a defiant attitude, "Darn, I thought I was going to get close to $9 million after we got married. I researched how much your mother left you." The sudden change in Kenny, who had always seemed so gentle, shocked everyone. Perhaps I should have been suspicious of a man like him from the beginning. I met Kenny at a dating event, and despite being 10 years younger, I thought we married for love. but his betrayal hurt me deeply. From now on, Kenny would be a stranger to me and my brother, so naturally, he had to pay back the money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, saying he couldn't do that. But with all the relatives present willing to testify against him, there was no escaping the consequences. However, I assured him that I wouldn't ask for child support. Really? Well, at least I'm grateful for that, Kenny responded. In return, Kenny, you'll have nothing to do with this child. This is my child alone. You can't even claim to be its father, I firmly stated, placing my hand on my belly. Upon hearing this, Kenny looked devastated and collapsed. Since the divorce, he had been living in poverty, working odd jobs. One day, my phone rang, and it was Kenny. Despite not wanting anything to do with him, he kept calling, so I reluctantly answered. Rachel, please help me, Kenny pleaded in a pitiful voice. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny sold the piano, he had claimed it was in pristine condition. However, there was a large engraving on the back made by my brother, claiming ownership. Kenny hadn't checked the back and likely sold it through a shady dealer. Now facing the consequences, Kenny had to return $200,000 to the buyer, and with what he owed my brother, it was a substantial amount. He later tried to file for bankruptcy, but my brother and I took legal action to stop him. Now burdened with even more debt, Kenny worked day and night doing manual labor. Eventually, the grand piano was safely returned, and my brother put a strong lock on the room where it was kept, even installing a security camera. No one's going to touch that piano until I start my piano lessons, my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood. He expressed his wish to start a piano school at our family home, so I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Catherine, my brother's wife, had taken care of our mother, and I felt guilty about inheriting everything by myself. Thanks to my brother agreeing with my decision, it seems we'll continue to have a good relationship with his family in the future. Blessed with a long-awaited baby girl, I became a single mom, but Catherine, who's already done with her parenting, is fully supporting me. My brother said he's going to step in as a father figure for my daughter, and he's excited about it. His influence has led his 2 adult daughters, who love the piano, to become kindergarten teachers. They have also come to adore my daughter. I feel fortunate to be supported by such a warm family, and with gratitude to those around me, I intend to live strong with my daughter